Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about anxiety disorders, which is a group of different types of disorders where they all have similar symptoms like anxiety. Um, so, uh, you know, we're going to be talking about categories of disorders and have several disorders fit under each of these categories. So our first grouping is anxiety, and then next we'll talk about mood disorders. But anxiety disorders, anxiety is normal. Everyone has anxiety. It keeps you alive. It keeps you from stepping too close to the cliff and crossing the street in the middle of rush hour. So some anxiety is good. Anxiety to the point of where it is unusual, maladaptive, disturbing to others, and distressful, that is a problem. That's when it falls under the category of disorder as opposed to just normal anxiety. So, a patient often fears something bad's going to happen to them. Sometimes these are irrational fears, and it gets in the way of people living normal lives. So one of the disorders that we're going to talk about is a phobia. So phobias, there's a whole bunch of them, whether it's, arachnophobia, fear of spiders, claustrophobia, fear of small spaces. The one phobia that pops up every once in a while is right here. It's agoraphobia. This is a fear of public spaces or open spaces. This popped up on a couple years ago's FRQ where it was like, Sarah goes to college. How's agoraphobia going to affect her? So you could say something to the effect of, Sarah, if she has agoraphobia and she has a fear of open spaces, she might not go visit the football stadium on games because of all the people, because it's a public place and it's really wide open. She feels overwhelmed by that. She feels she feels that she is scared. It is terrifying. It's a terrifying experience for her. Okay. But that's the definition of phobia. It's an irrational fear. There are rational fears that keep us safe, but when it's like irrational and they're not in any danger, or it's just very unusual, like they can't live a normal life, then it becomes a phobia. So there, you can go check out phobias online. There's always a list. And there's like things added to it every single day. So it's always fun to just go check those out. Here are some common fears that people have. You see that we have the green bar is like afraid of it, bothers slightly, and not afraid at all. So the higher the green bar, the bottom bar, the more people are fearful of it. So snakes being high in exposed places, like maybe falling, that is pretty high fear. And you could, argue that this could be based on like evolution. Our ancestors that were afraid of snakes, they were more likely to avoid snakes and therefore more likely to live longer and pass on their genes. And so the genes of being afraid of snakes passed on. Our ancestors that were not afraid of snakes were more likely maybe to play with snakes or not all that careful around snakes and more likely to get bit and die. So, and they did not pass on their genes. So this is a gene that's like a survival of the fittest type of gene. So you also see flying on an airplane, thunder, dogs, cats being at the very end of that list, but just common fears that people have. Another anxiety disorder, so still under the category of anxiety, but just not phobias anymore, is a common disorder, which is generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD for short. So phobias is different because if, let's say, you are afraid of this pen, I present the pen, you are scared, your heart is beating, you've got the sympathetic nervous system happening, I take the pen away, your fear decreases, your heart rate goes back to normal because it's this pen that you're afraid of. But with generalized anxiety disorder, you have anxiety without some sort of trigger, without something causing it. It's just like all the time. So a person, it has tense apprehension. They're in a state of autonomic nervous system arousal, which you have a picture of right there, of whether it is they're dizzy, they are sweating, they might have chest pain, they might feel like they're having a heart attack. And there's no apparent cause like there is with a phobia. It's generalized anxiety all the time. Another disorder under, my dog, and there's, you can see there's dog right there. Jackie, do you want to go say hi? There you go. Be free. Okay. Go away. All right, there we go. They can go frolic or do whatever dogs do. Another type of disorder is panic disorder. So think of like a panic attack where they're frequent, like enough, not just one panic attack, but it's a disorder. So it's marked by minutes-long episodes of intense dread, which a person fears, something is awful is happening to them. They have terror, they have chest pain, they feel like they're having a heart attack, they're choking, they have a very frightening sensation. But it's very, very intense, but it's very, very quick. So we're only talking about, just a few minutes of panic attack. While generalized anxiety is that sense of dread. It's not as intense, but it's all the time, versus panic disorders comes in like waves. And then phobias would just be like just for that one thing, and then it's gone. Another anxiety disorder, which you might be familiar with, is if you look at this, we've got like lists. So we've got hand washing, we have checking off things to do, OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. You can see it says OCD right behind me, but I'm going to keep my picture up right here because I'm tired of moving it around. So Obsessive Compulsive Disorder have two bits, and you'll be surprised that it's obsessive and compulsive. So obsessive means that like you have it's a mental worrying. You become obsessed with it, while compulsion is a behavior. So obsessive is a mental process. You become obsessed, but like your mental, you keep going over and over and over in your head, it's thinking, while a compulsion is a behavior, something that you have to do. So people that have OCD might have this fear of germs. And so their obsession is like, I feel dirty. I feel unclean. I need to do this. I'm going to get sick if I don't. While compulsion is the compulsion, they might need to wash their hands all the time, like obsessively. So it's got those two things. 2 to 3% of the population suffers from OCD, and it comes out in the late teens, early 20s. And it's because different disorders pop up different times. So this is typically pretty young, because like schizophrenia, we'll talk about later, comes out in like the 20s, and 20s for men and like 30s for women. So it might come out later on in life. But it's compulsive, rigid behavior, lots of checking and ordering, cleaning, hoarding. Hoarding is a type of OCD. So I know that you might think of like OCD as like being really clean and organized, and then hoarding is really dirty. But yes, it is a type. I mean, it's a compulsion. It's a behavior to keep everything, to not throw everything away. And the obsession of like, if I throw things away, I'm going to need it, or this is important, or this piece of paper represents something. And so it's a little bit of both. OCD is not just like, well, I always have to, use a red pen to grade my quizzes, or I have to always have like my spiral. No, it is, I cannot do this. I cannot move on unless this is done this way. And people that like do things in sets of numbers, whether it's sets of numbers of like 3 or 7 or 9, they have to maybe click certain things or touch certain things or say a certain phrase so many times, because they feel like if they don't do that, something terrible is going to happen. Like if I don't click my pen in like 3 times for 3 times, they feel like I might get in a wreck later today, or I'm going to get sick. So something totally irrational. People that like lock their cars 2 times just to make sure that it's locked, that's not OCD. That is like, that makes sense just to check. But to think that like, if I don't click it 3 times in a row, that I'm going to, like, my family members are going to get sick. That's irrational. So that doesn't really make sense. Another type of anxiety disorder is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So this typically occurs after someone goes through something very, very traumatic. It's a common symptom of people that have like been in the military and have seen fighting. So it's typically involved flashbacks, or nightmares, that they're reliving the experience. Maybe certain smells, certain sounds, certain things just trigger it, and they all of a sudden they're back and experiencing that again. So whether they were in the traumatic experience or just involved, like they just witnessed a traumatic experience or extremely stressful event, that can cause PTSD. So this disorder can lead to depression, which is a mood disorder. It can lead to anxiety, a feeling like, oh no, something's going to trigger me and I'm going to have an episode, and maybe I'm going to be like not in my house, or I feel like I'm not going to be in a safe environment if that were to happen. It can lead to uncontrollable crying, edginess, inability to concentrate. It can lead to abusing alcohol or drugs as a way to self-medicate. But it's very common in people that have been in a major car accident, or have had a physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, or they have been at a time of war, and just all of a sudden they get flashbacks and they're reliving it all over again. So how do you explain these disorders and how do you treat these disorders? So from the learning perspective, remember, this is the condition, like you've been conditioned, the behavioral perspective. We've talked about fears. So we've talked about phobias, like with, little baby Albert being the fear of rats. That was, John B. Watson, conditioning him to have a phobia. So all of our phobias, besides like loud noises and falling, those have been taught through classical conditioning. We have learned those. So PTSD has been learned through classical conditioning. So, if someone was in war and they hear like bangs, maybe they have been conditioned that you hear a bang, you hit the ground, you're trying to protect yourself, you're being shot at, they've been conditioned. So maybe they come back years later, they hear a firecracker, or they hear someone's like car make a noise or something, and all of it, they've been conditioned to like hit the deck and to protect their head or something, and that's their PTSD coming back, because they've been conditioned to be afraid of these things, or to this certain smell, like a firework might set them off because it smells like smoke and burning, and it just brings them back to their time at war. In a biological perspective, anxiety is normal. It kept our ancestors alive. We talked about that. Maybe that's why a lot of people are afraid of snakes, because your ancestors were afraid of snakes and that was passed down. It's genetics. Maybe if your parents have anxiety disorders, maybe not a phobia per se. I don't think that's going to be passed down, but maybe just they have generalized anxiety disorder, or they have panic attacks. You're more likely to also have anxiety disorders because it's genetics. You can see OCD, if I can take a picture, where is it? There it is. You can see OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, in the frontal lobe. Remember, the frontal lobe is all about, yes, it's personality, but it's also about like decision making. And, think about someone that is clicking a pen, or washing their hands over and over again. It's like the decision making constantly happening. They cannot relax and like, okay, I'm done. The decision has been made. It's over. It's constantly overworked. And so how do you treat some anxiety disorders is by anti-anxiety medicine like Valium. So remember what GABA does. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It slows neurons down. It slows the firing of neurons. And which alcohol increases our GABA, but Valium increases our GABA. So it slows down the activity. So the overactivity that you see in this picture of the frontal lobe, it's going to slow that activity down. And so their neurons are going to be firing less frequently, and they'll just be more calm. Their heartbeat will relax, and all those sympathetic nervous systems will flip to more of a parasympathetic nervous system response. Okay, we're going to talk about mood disorders tomorrow, but that is it for anxiety disorders. Have a great afternoon. Hopefully you learned a lot, and I didn't give you too much anxiety by going over notes too quickly or too slowly or anything like that. Anyway, have a great afternoon, and I will see you.